People that have a console do not want to have to fiddle with it. They just want to turn it on and have it work. And welcome back to GT Canada. Today I want to talk to you about the reasons why your PlayStation 5 is highly unlikely to get an internal storage upgrade anytime soon. So for those of you that are not familiar, the PlayStation 5, it only has 667 gigabytes of available internal storage. That's not a whole lot, especially when we're talking about a current gen system. So on the other systems, on the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4 specifically, you were always able to pull out the hard drive that was in the system and replace it with a larger hard drive, reinstall the operating system and install all your games and immediately have higher capacity. The PlayStation 5 is different, however, and I'm going to show you. What I want to look at specifically is the memory modules. So here, as he flips it over, you can see those are the memory modules. There's 3 of them there. Those comprise the internal storage of the PlayStation 5. It's across 3 chips. Now those chips are not cheap. If you have bought an internal SSD, you know that just a low spec SSD, 128 gigabytes or so, is still around $50 for a bundled package. These are a lot higher spec SSDs, and they're all soldered right onto the board, and they're controlled by a custom SSD controller. That is a separate chip that controls how that memory is utilized. It's very expensive, and as you can see here, it's fully integrated into the current PlayStation 5 main board. That means adding more storage space to this design requires a completely new design. It's not as simple as just soldering another chip onto that board. It is not like the PlayStation 3 or the PlayStation 4, where you can remove the commercially available hard drive and swap in a new hard drive and or SSD. Sony has offered another solution, which I also want to talk about. So earlier on in this teardown, we see the expansion slot, which is a PCIe expansion slot that can take a number of memory cards or storage devices. The problem with that, many people assumed that right off the bat they could drop whatever storage drive they had in there and immediately expand their hard drive space or their internal storage space. That has proved to be not the case. In fact, if you have a PlayStation 5 and you stuck your own SSD into that slot, you would be greeted on boot up with a message that says, unauthorized hardware has been installed in the system. Please power it down and boot it up when the hardware has been removed. That is specifically referencing that internal storage slot. We do have word that the slot will become unlocked this summer and allow you to use specific storage drives. Now, I have done other videos talking about what that actually means, but I'm going to go a little bit in depth into some theories that I have about how Sony will utilize this internal space and how I think they should utilize it. First, I want to close the loop on the whole internal drive option. So as we already have pointed out, you can't just solder more memory onto the main board. It would require a main board redesign. There are rumors circulating right now that Sony is in talks. Their current chip is a 7 nanometer chip, which means it's really small. The technology is small. However, there's a 6 nanometer solution that is going to be available really soon. And there are rumors that Sony is actually going to be modifying their main board to accept the 6 nanometer AMD processors. When that happens, there is a chance, a very small chance, that Sony will also add more capacity, if you will, to add more storage chips to the main board at that time, which would allow for a higher spec PlayStation 5 to be released at that time. There's also rumors that that would be the same time that they would release the PlayStation 5 Slim model, because people are talking about how there will be a redesign of the actual shell and the shape and so on of the PlayStation 5. Now that is very early to be discussing that, and they say it'll be about 2023, which isn't too far away, it's 2 years from now. However, that doesn't address the problem of the internal storage being too small. So when this storage slot becomes unlocked, you will be able to put a drive into that slot. How will you know what drives you can put in? Most people believe that Sony will be creating a virtual whitelist, if you will, where they will put exact manufacturers and models of SSDs that can be installed and have been bench tested to meet the minimum specs. Now that becomes problematic in maintaining that whitelist, because every time a new drive comes out, you would need a software update that would at least expand on that whitelist. They could have workarounds for that where they dial a Sony server and then ask it for the current whitelist rather than baking it into the software. But it requires Sony a little bit too much hands-on every time a new drive is released. Every time a vendor requests to have their drive added to the whitelist, there's work that Sony has to do. Personally, I think that Sony's going to just detect that a new hardware device has been installed, and if it's an SSD, they will perform a benchmark test on it. That they will test the read speeds and the write speeds, and they will then say, this drive meets the minimum standards for read and write, and therefore we'll never check it again in your system as long as it's not removed, and allow you to run that. That would be a way more open way of them handling this, because they don't have to then go and list specific drives or block specific hardwares. It's just, you've put in new hardware, we'll do a bench test, away you go. The next thing is, how will Sony utilize this drive? Now, most people are believing that they will have their internal storage, then they would have their internal expansion slot storage, and there's a third option, which would be the external USB storage. I personally don't think that they're gonna treat the internal storage through the expansion slot and the regular internal storage separately. I think they will just make it a cumulative increase. If you got a 1 terabyte drive and installed that in your PlayStation 5, it would add to the 666 gigabytes that you had, and you would have somewhere around 1.6 terabytes of internal storage space. Why would they do that? Because I think they don't want people to have to try to manage it too much. People that have a console do not want to have to fiddle with it. They just want to turn it on and have it work. So once the internal storage gets full, it could copy the rest of that data to the internal expansion slot, and you wouldn't know and you wouldn't care, because that drive meets the same basic specs as the internal one. So it could be treated in that same way. The reason also why I think that they're going to do it this way is because Sony will inevitably have Sony authorized and Sony branded internal drives, which would allow Sony to sell them as an add-on, but also create bundles. This is why I think that they're going to make it a cumulative storage capacity rather than separate, because now they can throw a cheaper SSD in, 256 gigabyte even, because then they can sell a 1 terabyte PlayStation 5. It doesn't matter that it's across 2 different drives anymore, as long as when you turn the system on and it says available storage, 1 terabyte or somewhere around there, you're happy. It's not 667 anymore, it's 1 terabyte. The Xbox fanboys can be quiet about how they got more space, and Sony can leverage the reduction in manufacturing costs, which inevitably happens as the console extends into the life cycle. That's what I think is going to happen. Summer will prove how it happens to us, but I think Sony wants to be able to add, they don't want to have to redesign the motherboard to increase the storage capacity. So the easy thing is make it cumulative, that way they can add their own storage capacity, sell it as a bundled package, increase the price a little bit, and make it more attractive to some of those gamers. If they don't do that, what I would love to see Sony do, and I don't think they will, but what I would love to see is that they reserve, say, 200 gigabytes of the internal storage, the really fast memory, and save that. Allow you to install maybe a lower spec internal drive into that slot, a lower spec SSD into that internal slot, and use the main soldered on storage space of the PlayStation 5, almost like RAM. But as soon as you boot the game, it'll run off the internal storage slot, the SSD that you installed. While it's running, it would transfer all the game data, all of it, into that 200 gigabytes of reserved system storage. And then at some point there'd be a handoff where it runs that game within that storage space. And as long as you just keep loading that game, it'll just leave it there because it is there. But if you load a different game that is getting accessed from the SSD rather than the internal storage, it would simply dump that game because it still exists on the SSD that you installed. It's not like it deletes it. It just copied the file over. So then it could copy the new game that you just loaded into that 200 gigabyte buffer and then read off of that. I think it would allow them to provide a more seamless experience. It would allow you to put a lower spec SSD expansion in, which saves you money and allows them to get really crazy. You can go and get an inexpensive 2 terabyte drive, have that in, you would never notice the difference. At the boot up as it's going, it's just transferring the data in the background. Sure, it will take, and we've done speed tests, we know that it's gonna take 20 minutes to transfer a really big game when you have a low spec SSD, but who cares? Most gamers are playing for more than 20 minutes anyway, and you can load the first part of the game and start running off of that internal storage almost right away while the rest of the game loads in. So it would be a unique solution that I think they can do. It's all software based, and that would allow consumers a lot more options. I don't think they're gonna do it. Sony, if you're watching this video, please consider it or tell me why that won't work, because I think it will. I know this video is getting a little bit long. I just wanted to put some of those rumors to rest about the being able to offer a bigger storage solution within the PlayStation 5 and why that won't happen, not anytime soon at least. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe below. While you're waiting for the next video to drop, check out some of the other videos over here. We hope to see you again, but until next time, have a great day.